Good evening, everyone, and Ramadan Mubarak to everyone who is celebrating. I'm thrilled this evening to be joined by Zuleika Shehzad, founder and creative director of Zarif Design, which is an Afghan fashion brand which seeks to preserve Afghanistan's rich cultural heritage and support Afghan skilled artisanship whilst practicing the art of slow production. We're also joined by Tanya Arya, the founder of Visa, an authentic handmade Afghan jewelry brand which aims to highlight the brilliance of Afghan gemstones and craftsmanship with modern contemporary design twists. We've also got Jeanne de Kroon with us, the founder of Zazie Vintage, a luxury brand that works alongside the UN Ethical Fashion Initiative with women artisanal communities across the world, including in Afghanistan. And finally, we're thrilled to have Joanna Breshna from scarf brand Azizana here, a business that's committed to supporting vulnerable Afghan women to build sustainable livelihoods whilst reviving Afghanistan's silk and cashmere industry. So to kick things off this evening, I've got a short clip to play from Zuleika, which gives an overview of Zarif's work and core values. So I'm just going to pop over onto that video for you guys to have a watch.
My name is Zuleika. I went back to Afghanistan in 2005. I knew I wanted to start a project related to the arts and crafts, and this is how Zarif was born. At first, there was a desire to revive the ancient traditional skills, such as the art of weaving, the production of silk, the dyeing of natural fibers, the beautiful handmade embroideries. All these centuries-old traditions that I remembered and that were endangered. The word Zarif in Dari stands for something delicate, refined. There is a subtle elegance and grace which defines Afghan culture for me. And this is what I wanted to convey. Celebrate the beauty that resides in our country. From the very beginning, Zarif was about human and social relationships. Creating clothes was a means to bring people together, connect artisans from different provinces, and build bridges between culture, between Kabul, Paris, London, and New York, where people would wear clothes made in Afghanistan. Each piece is unique, entirely handmade, locally, with the utmost care, like a poem. Each piece tells a story, contributes to change the life of talented men and women who regain their dignity as they rediscover their heritage and their identity. Their passionate efforts revive the tradition and reshape the future while challenging the established dress code. The chapan, traditionally for men, is envisioned anew for men and women. The turban emerges as a blouse. The calligraphy breaks free. At Zarif, we strive to celebrate freedom, hope, on peace.
So, sort of coming off that film now and looking, Zuleika, at the core values that kind of we outlined there in terms of reviving tradition and shaping the future. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that kind of informed, your founding of Zarif and how, a bit more about the traditions that you're trying to revive in terms of Afghanistan's role on the Silk Road?
Okay, thank you, first of all, Kate, for including this clip. And nice seeing everyone that I think we know all each other. I think just before the slogan of reviving the tradition, shaping the future, for me, the core value, and I think I mentioned in the clip, is really changing the perspective of Afghanistan. That I perceived as when I grew up in the West. Afghanistan was mainly a civil war context for any Afghan that was outside, changing the perspective for myself, but also for the world. And I think as soon as I was back in Afghanistan, initially supporting schools from 2000 to 2005, I just realized how much was there, how much to discover for myself and for the Afghans. And I believe with a country like Afghanistan that went through 30 years of war, and now it's like 40 years of war, this sense of identity, this sense of origin is so important. As a refugee, you really long for that connection wherever you are. So I imagine for the people that were turning in Afghanistan, it was so important. And after many years of supporting education, I just realized how much the cultural identity was important. So in that sense, the value to build your own self, that was the initial, the core that was really kind of created Zarif. And of course, empowerment of the women, empowerment of the artisans in what they have already in hands. Rather than looking and seeking another skills, I felt like we had those beautiful skills that were like, weaving was disappearing, tailoring, it was mainly coming from the external market. How do we regain a sense of identity and a sense of pride into creating our own brand, our own, our own self in a way?
Yeah, great. So could you tell us a little bit more, just to touch on kind of, for our audience members who don't know, a little bit about the history of the Silk Road and just where, that's then informed the kind of tradition that was so intrinsic to Afghan culture, but that you're trying to revive?
Yeah, I think the history of the Silk Road, it's such a very important part of the history of the world in a way. And I think Afghanistan was at its core from being a passage, a crossroad, but also in its origin from the miniature, the production, miniature originated from Afghanistan, from Herat. The silk weaving, the center of silk was in Iraq. It was a place of exchange. So it's at its core, from the Islamic, from the ceramic, all of that, Afghanistan was a crossroads. So I think it still is in a different scale. Afghanistan plays an important role globally. But I think by creating those connections that was at a much more closer scale in a way, where people were connected through the trade, creating those trades again back locally before we expanded, internationally. So for Zarif was, how do you create those connections from the farmers to the weavers to the seamstresses and until to the international market. So somehow summarizing it back to the textile, but in a way it takes different communities into that.
Yeah, it's great. So kind of coming off this, if I could turn to you, Duana, now, sort of as Izana operates with the same kind of idea, right, in terms of reviving what we've just spoken about, the silk and cashmere production and the kind of textiles industry within Afghanistan. Could you tell us a little bit more first about the kind of journey into founding as Izana, and then also how this history of silk production is kind of at the core of the brand?
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for inviting Azizana to the session. Azizana was founded by Shaima Breshna in 2003, basically after she returned back to Afghanistan after 20 years. And when she returned back to Afghanistan, she was devastated to see how the country was hit by the political upheavals that it had gone through back then, through the Russian-Afghan war and then the Taliban, and the poverty that struck the women of Afghanistan. Women always tend to be the vulnerable part of the society when it comes to political upheaval, years of political upheaval. She was also devastated to see that a very ancient craft, that was the silk weaving industry, had basically died off. There was nobody carrying on that occupation. There were very few weavers that she found, and she tried to revive that ancient craftsmanship, where she also saw it as a potential to train vulnerable women who were leading a life below poverty. And back then she was challenged, actually, that women wouldn't be able to carry on or to go through silk weaving, because silk weaving was considered to be a male occupation. It was considered to be very laborious or very arduous. And she challenged that, and she went and tried providing training skills in silk weaving to women. Back then, it was basically through friends, and there was also a cultural mentality out there. You just cannot have women coming into workshops and train them. There had to be some kind of trust that you had to build, and which she did by staying there for years and started training with 2 women. And now we have around 16 women who are trained in silk weaving and spinning, natural dyeing, and we've also introduced cashmere, which is an adjacent product. The cashmere is also originates from Afghanistan, and the main mission actually of Azizana is also to revive the ancient craftsmanship, but also to rebuild the Afghan economy. That means whatever Azizana does is basically to support and to have a positive impact on the Afghan economy. All the raw material from silk to cashmere, which we source from Herat, comes from Afghanistan. The natural dyes, the wooden handlooms, And so that means it is also a value chain that we are creating for Afghanistan, supporting small businesses out there, local businesses out there, by supporting silk cultivators, silkworm cultivators, cashmere goat breeders, and also the women out there. It's been now almost 18 years, actually more than 18 years. And and that's how Azizana's story started.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Now, if I can move on to Jeanne, please could you tell us about your story, sort of founding Zazi Vintage, and as part of that, what kind of drew you to Afghanistan to work with Afghan artisanal communities and also to use sort of Afghan and Central Asian source materials?
Yes, first of all, I'm so absolutely honored to be amongst all of these speakers. It's such a joy, and I'm originally from the Netherlands, so for me, like the link to Afghanistan was not very obvious. Coming from my start, I came from the fashion industry briefly, and through my travels, I fell in love with the stories of the women that I met along my way. And one of them was a family from Afghanistan, and I remember I met them in 2015 during one of my travels. And I think this was just a really interesting process of both decolonization myself, but also of understanding how limited the story of Afghanistan is in the West. I think, when you grow up, especially in the global North, you have this really limited view. And I think most Afghans, not all Afghans, they know how incredible, Afghan heritage and stories are. But I think when you grow up in I grew up in the Netherlands. So I think for me, Afghanistan was very limited to war and lots of, just very heavy feeling. I mean, even still, when you Google Afghanistan, you just see like images of war and army. And I think there are all of these layers. And I think for me, it was just such a joy to, for the first time, sit there with a family that actually sources a lot of vintage. And I remember sitting there in a small little room in India at the time, and it was during one of my travels, and they just told me just about the Bamyan region and about all of these incredible ancient sites. And they, played Pashtun music, and they showed me all the nieces and dancing and twirling dresses and incredible embroidery and just all of these really beautiful stories of the Silk Road. And I think for me, that was such a start of just being oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. How come not more people know this side of Afghanistan? And I think that's partly because it probably stays really in the Afghan communities. So I think that was also one of my main visions or drives, I guess, to bring these stories to more communities. And I think during that process, it was a really interesting thing to see so many people around me that are that we receive people's emails that are just oh my God, we saw a photo shoot in Afghanistan, and we never understood Afghanistan like this. And through the storytelling that I guess Zazi has been doing in a way, which is also definitely a process of learning, it's been a really beautiful journey to try to figure out how can I, in my capacity, in my learning process, also facilitate this learning process to people around me and to people that are not familiar yet with the incredible deep richness of the woven Afghan community that is, it just blows my mind every single time when I hear the stories and when I see the fabrics and the textiles. That is not only the center of the silk trading route, but also I'm so honored to speak along this panel and also to hear those stories of, reviving natural dyes, reviving the local Afghan supply chain, because I think people just don't know that there are so many possibilities. And there are so many people and so many companies right now looking for stories, to connect to. And I think, there is just a lot that can be grown. So when I connected, sorry, I'm just going on a whole talking thing with myself now. But when I initially connected to the Afghan family, I mean, they initially they sent me a few dresses, and I think that was my first little learning step. And I remember my dad always used to call me Zazie, because there's a movie called Zazie dans le métro from France about I think just like a little bit of a rebel child that walks in the metro. I've never actually seen it. But then later on, I also discovered that Zazie is also one of the, I think, embroidery, and it's also from like a certain region, and it's one of the most incredible, like intricate, you know, tribes within Afghanistan and embroidery. And I was like, oh my God. So there, and Afghanistan kept on coming back. So I also work alongside EFI in Tajikistan and in Uzbekistan. Then when I met Simone Cipriani, he told me about Zuleika, that is also on this panel. And he had the most, I mean, when you meet Simone, he just has, you know, there's so much joy speaking through his eyes. And then he spoke about Zuleika, and it was just like, you know, he discovered like, oh my God, you have to hear this story. And there's this incredible woman that set up, the social enterprise, and we would love to link you to her. So we did a collaboration, and I think I'm still learning so much about, you know, the communities within the Afghan supply chain, and really excited to continue working with Afghanistan. Now we work a lot with Tarzan and Blinkley, which is a social enterprise in Kabul that employs a lot of returnees and female embroiderers and Afghan artisans from all over. And then we work through my personal contacts with families that source vintage and families that are, you know, in the incredible coat tradition, which I guess Afghanistan is also very much known for. And it's been an absolute honor to work with Afghan creatives as well, both photographers to the beautiful community that we have around us from all kinds of backgrounds. And within that process, I still really hope that this will last for a very long time, and that I can also just change a lot of perspectives, which I think is really the power of fashion and the power of storytelling, because it's kind of like a story through thread. So what Zuleika so beautifully said in the video, it's like a poem. So that's my story.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So now, Tanya, can you please tell us about Visa and your journey into founding your jewelry business?
Thank you very much. I'm really, really honored to be here among the panelists today. The word is called Vija, which is a dairy term. It means unique and special. I've been working in the gemstone sector for almost 5 years now. Previously, I was working as a development expert with USAID and some of the other international projects for the economic growth of Afghanistan. And I've supported businesses who are working in this sector for the last 5 years now, taking them to trade shows, training them on how to market their products, and how to engage with their clients and how to improve the quality of their products. In the beginning of 2019, I moved to the United States, and having worked with the sector and with the perception that I faced, I've experienced that a couple of times before that as well. But when you move to a new place and people would see you with a different perspective. I mean, they wouldn't believe that an Afghan woman are progressive as any other citizen in the world. And they're kind of seeing us with sympathy. And, I wanted to change that. I mean, I do not deny we do have those problems in the country, but that's not the entire thing that we have. So as Zuleika and Jean also mentioned, I wanted to introduce my country in a different way that very less people get to know that. And having worked in the sector, and I thought, why not the gemstone and jewelry of Afghanistan? Firstly, because it will change the perspective of people that we are not a poor country. Research shows that there are more than 1,400 minerals in Afghanistan, and 120 of them are attributed to gemstones only. We have introduced some of the world-class gemstones, including lapis lazuli, which is still Afghanistan has the best lapis lazuli resources in the entire world. We are hosting tremendous and beautiful high-quality deposits of emeralds, rubies, sapphires, spinel, and so many other semi-precious stones, including aquamarine, tourmaline. So this was one of the areas that not much work was done. And also knowing the heritage of handcraft that we have and the skills that our country men and women own, I wanted to present it to the global market. So that's how Bija was founded. I also had a sense of, paying back to my country because I was grown up there. Unlike the other panelists who spent kind of most of their time abroad and out of the country, I was raised among the communities, and I've seen the ups and downs of the country, how people are struggling, how they are continuing in the war zone, still being hopeful for their country, for the future of the country. So I wanted to introduce that spirit and that values that we carry, not just to Afghans themselves, but also to the international community. Having said that, I produce the entire production of the jewelry is conducted within the country in Afghanistan. I currently support about 17 artisans, men and women, who are directly working and producing our products, but we're also indirectly supporting others because the value chain of Afghanistan gemstone in jewelry, one gemstone creates 5 other jobs in the supply chain. So indirectly, we're supporting so many others, which we're proudly taking and continuing the work that we're doing. But talking more on the designs that what inspired me, as others mentioned, I have the same take on reviving the values that we have, but also building onto them. I'm just going to give you a simple example of what I'm wearing today. This is inspired by the Tela Tepe treasures of Afghanistan, which is currently on exhibition globally. These are the golden treasures of Afghanistan, which was discovered very recently, but it belongs to the Bactria time of Afghanistan. So, but not many people get to know about it. But I've also simplified this design in order to make it wearable in today's world, because Afghanistan's jewelry is known for tribal jewelry. And even now, if you Google Afghan jewelry, you'll see all the pictures of very beautiful, but heavy pieces that you cannot wear on your day-to-day life, or you cannot wear. They're not diverse enough, so I wanted to give that versatility aspect to my designs. Still, all the jewelry that you would see on my website, they carry and they are inspired with the heritage and culture of Afghanistan, but they are also in a designs that you can wear it in your day-to-day life on the occasions and different things. And the other perspective that I wanted to add was to be a voice for Afghan women. And that's why each of my collections are named after an Afghan female name, and it carries with the story that it covers. For example, one of my collections are called Rangina. Rangina is a Dari term which means colorful, and that collection is made with 5 different shades of agate, which is another gemstone of Afghanistan. By that, I wanted to introduce, or that collection symbolizes the ethnicities, different ethnicities of Afghanistan, and the message it had with no matter from what background, what ethnicity we come from, if we are together, we look pretty and we look beautiful. And that's the power of, embracing diversity and acceptance. So each of my collections, I have tried to introduce the Afghan culture, but also give a voice to Afghan women. What do they want, and how they aspire their, goals in future.
Brilliant, thank you. I love that. I love that last bit of the necklace.
Thank you.
Zuleika, if I could come back to you, just kind of coming off this point, talking about putting a contemporary spin on sort of when you're paying homage to tradition, but putting a contemporary spin on it. Could you, talk to us a little bit about how you kind of produce exciting, cutting edge designs to kind of merge tradition with a modern aesthetic? Yeah.
I think just the weaving is such a beautiful, by itself for me, it's already modern. Those geometric lines, the colors are somehow timeless. So for me, the modern, past, present, I would say what I try to do is to be more authentic to the present, to this time. on, this collection I have done like a few years ago. It's still valid for me in a way. This notion of time is so subjective. So, but you want to actualize some of those designs. When I saw those initial traditional chapan, I mainly work on and got inspired by the chapan fabric, which is a traditional weave in the north. Initially, those coats were very like a 2D, there was no form. It's flat. It's almost like a simple 2D. There is no fold. There is no cut. So I got inspired by the fabric, but slowly got it to a tailored jacket, something that could be actualized. And when we talk about modernized, it's about getting it to the present time. And I felt like there was a need for the woman mainly, because the first jacket, the collection I did, it was for women. So it was quite interesting in 2005, which was like 5 years after the Taliban, to have women wearing those jackets that were made from the Afghan chapan, which men wears. And I did it, very naturally, without really trying to do anything special about the gender issue. But I felt like we were, asking for woman empowerment, giving back a sense of, power and dignity. And I think those tailored jackets brought back the shape of a woman. And very decent, very simple in a way. But in that sense, for me, this interpretation of the modern, it came very simply into creating something that was functional as well. And then maybe in terms of the embroidery work, it's really changing the scale of the embroidery, looking at the embroidery at a different angle, not always in the same space and the same format. By changing it, translating it, you rediscover the work. For me, it's a way to re-look at the work and the tradition. The same way that Tanya is doing, borrowing elements, but then reframing them on a different scale, different setting.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And kind of coming off something you were talking about earlier, just to get you to expand on it a little bit more, because I think it's really interesting. When you're talking about this kind of hybridity and making things more modern and or using designs and fabrics that are already modern, but as you say, kind of reimagining them. Can you talk to me a little bit more about why you think for members of the diaspora community, sort of wearing and enjoying traditional clothing, but also clothing that has these elements of tradition and also some modernity in it? Could you talk to me a little bit about how important that is for sort of cultivating a relationship with home?
I think, again, it's a sense of identity. We all look for that sense of who we are. And I would go even beyond the Afghan diaspora. I would say, as a human being anywhere, I try to promote not the Afghan clothing or Afghan brand. I'm trying to really bridge that sense that, we're, as we say, we are a village in a way, that knowing the history of Afghanistan is knowing your history. We're connected and there's a reflection. It's like a mirror between each other. So I think for the Afghans, it's essential because, there's especially for the one that have left since years, you're longing for your mother land, and you try to borrow, if it comes directly now from people that are being empowered, there's this connection. You feel like you're a participant into rebuilding of your country. It's not just a fashion. I think it's a statement. It's a way of being and being active into that. The main reason I do the production of the clothing is that I'm not really interested in fashion myself. It's a way for me to utilize that medium and make it and empowering the artisan, but at the same time empowering the people that are wearing here to be participant into that peace building, or that is, as we see, Afghanistan is in the heart of Asia and heart of, that it's very important for the well-being of the whole world to consider and respect. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you. So now to kind of maybe move on and talk a bit more in depth about the kind of ethical and sustainable considerations and relationships with the artisanal communities that you all work with. Jeanne, could I come back to you? I mean, clearly your brand is very driven by your ethical impact, which includes thinking about your environmental impact. And so as a business, you do use, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of vintage and upcycled materials. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of why that's an important aspect of your design process?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this actually personifies the sort of relationship that we have as well, because I really feel like I don't really see myself as a designer. I think, like especially working also with indigenous designs that are, native to Afghanistan, but also to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. I think it's really what we've always tried to do with Zazie is sort of use it as a platform for the artisans to tell their stories. And I think that's also how the first, coat was made. That was initially because I went back to Berlin and then I was talking to the Afghan family and they were like, oh my God, okay, it's also very cold there. So, you must have one of our amazing coats. And then because they were a family that I think in 79 started to buy a lot of fabrics from all kinds of communities all over Afghanistan, they just had this like archive filled with, the most intricate Suzani fabrics, but also, we're really connected to still like traders within the Silk Road that either are going to India or to different, Istanbul or different places. So they had this incredible textile collection. And at the same time, they also told me that they were going to sort of secondhand markets, both in Mongolia and Pakistan, where they get like old jackets. So they sort of said like, okay, well, we'll come up with a really amazing design. And then we picked out some things together and then the first code was made. And then I think this is still sort of the process that we go in every single journey, is that we really want to, this is what we do right now as well in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and in Afghanistan, is to really be like, okay, so what can we create together and what kind of story can we tell together? And this is definitely a process that that's the most incredibly and rewarding. And at the same time, it also uses this incredible heritage of Afghanistan being the center of the Silk Road and being this sort of center of like where you can find the most intricate textiles with the most amazing stories. So, and of course, there's a very obvious environmental impact within our global like waste supply chain, and there are all of these layers. But I think what more, like, I feel always you can move people more like within the magic of like reviving traditional textiles and telling them stories about textile supply chain waste, because, or like, the environmental impact of certain water usage, just because I feel like, stories that move us are often stories that tell stories of land and nature, of humans and craft and creativity. And I think for me, it's been such a beautiful learning process to understand, the intricate meaning behind like a Suzani that's embroidered on white cloth with like a black thread, which represents sort of transcendence of life and death and like the moments of joy in between. Like for me, it's been such a learning journey to understand the deep layers of that fashion can have, that cultural heritage has. And I think we've lost it mostly in the West. Like I come from a weaving family myself. My last name is named after part of a weaving machine. Yet I had absolutely no idea what came, within the process of weaving, what came within the process of silk, what came within the process of, like all of these things that used to be so interwoven with our daily lives as women, as creators. So yeah,
Great.
The question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Kind of jumping off that, for some of our audience members who don't know about what the UN Ethical Fashion Initiative is, could you tell them a little bit more about what that kind of involves and how you work with the EFI and the kind of intricacies of that relationship?
Absolutely. And I think also probably Zuleika can maybe even share that story better, because she's the one that started with UN EFI in Kabul. So just thinking maybe I can give you the mic for the initial steps, because I feel like you could probably tell that story better, especially with the origins of the Afghan relationship.
For sure.
Yeah, Ethical Fashion Initiative, I think Jean mentioned earlier, Simone Cipriani, who's the founder, an amazing human being, incredible. I think the work they're trying to do currently is really working on the raw material. Right now, they're focused on silk, from the farming to the weaving. I think they're just finishing a training with a master weaver that I work with since 15 years. So I think the work they do also with the saffron, the dry fruits, basically trying to find, in fact, improve the quality, but also connecting to the international market. And of course, all of that within the ethical that the fair labor and all of that. So it's extremely interesting, and to see hopefully how many of those artisans are able to reach the market. I think that's the biggest challenge with the current situation, the politics, on the challenge of the market. And I'm part of one of their I am a local partner of ethical fashion. And I think the biggest challenge for us is how to reach the international market, because local market is, in the case of Zarif, doesn't exist. We don't have that income to maybe dry fruits would work for the local market. It's how do you, and also Afghanistan is a landlocked, and the shipping and all those logistics are very difficult. And I think it's something that has to be done from the government, and also hopefully with the support of the international community. So basically, I think the purpose of ethical fashion is really finding those artisans that are working ethically, and also teaching them, because there has been 30 years of war. Even though we had all those practices before, the war was quite ravaging in many levels.
Yeah, thank you so much. So if I come to Duana again now, it would be great to hear, you touched on it earlier in your introduction to the kind of work that Azizana do, but it would be great to hear about why sort of providing women in Afghanistan with sustainable livelihoods was such a kind of intrinsic philosophy of the business, and how that kind of informed, as you spoke about earlier, the wholly Afghan supply chain.
Well, our main ground idea was to have a systematic change, and that would mean a bottom-up approach. And the women that we were looking at were basically without any kind of basic education. And as the other panelists also mentioned it, decades of political upheaval wouldn't allow a certain section of the society to rise or to climb the social ladder, and so we were looking at women with basically absolutely no basically illiterate. And our approach was, besides providing them a training in silk weaving and reviving the ancient craftsmanship, was also to provide them with basic education, reading, writing, arithmetic skills, and which we all know provides all of us a certain sense of self-confidence, and allows you to jump over obstacles. And so besides the training skills, we've also training in weaving, we also have been providing them with basic educational skills. It wasn't only about economic empowerment that we were looking at. We were also looking about social empowerment, and I think at the end, we would have a smile on our face when one of the Afghan women who weave those beautiful scarves or silk and cashmere textiles would be sitting here and presenting Azizana by herself, instead of an intermediary person, and would be presenting her artisan works by herself. And that's the kind of empowerment that we would also, no question, there are, Afghanistan is gifted with with way advanced educational skills, but there is also a certain section of the society that needs to be given that kind of push. That's basically because of the political upheaval that it has been going through in the past 40 decades. And we really hope that the future is not going to take them 10 steps backwards, that the training that we are providing them gives them that self-confidence to go ahead and tomorrow present themselves at Afghanaid instead of me sitting here and talking to them.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks. And now, kind of coming back to Tanya, it would be great to hear as well about how, the men and women artisans that you work with, how, not only do you help to kind of strengthen and develop their sustainable livelihoods, but coming off this point about education, it's also worth noting that Vija obviously reinvest in women's education. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you very much. I've worked on women's empowerment, particularly women's economic empowerment, for the last 10 years. And I believe that's the core problem to be solved. If women are financially independent, they have a better position in decision making, starting with the family and all the way up to the country level. So when I founded Vija, I wanted to make sure that I pay something back. I've also been voluntarily mentoring and participating in a lot of, charity work and mentoring young women of Afghanistan in their education system. And one of them that was very close to my heart is Farhunda Trust. It's a UK-based charity that sponsors higher education of Afghan women across the country in Afghanistan. And I volunteered for them for 5 years. And when I founded Vija, I wanted to make sure that this relationship is even more sustainable in a good platform that I have now. So we share a percentage of our profit to sponsor the education of Afghan women through Farhunda Trust. And there's another NGO which is sponsoring the primary education of Afghan kids who are, that's my take of preventing child labor, because these little kids, they're on the streets, they're selling plastic bags. And I'm sure if you have traveled to Afghanistan, you've seen them. So this NGO is called Saraka. Well, it's an initiative where they introduce tickets to individual sponsors, and they sponsor each kid for as much long as they want to prevent them from working and focusing more on their education. So we're proudly working with these two initiatives to sponsor education of Afghan kids and Afghan women, in addition to the direct jobs that we are providing to our products.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And just as a kind of final point, I'm conscious of the time, so I know we want to get to some Q&A, but Zuleika, if I could just ask you a final question. Obviously, as part of the Fashion Revolution Week, which for our viewers who don't know, it's a week that campaigns for safe working conditions, fair wages and transparency across the global fashion industry. Kind of looking at the work you do to economically empower your artisans and ensure that they're at the center of your brand's sort of aims and values. We've talked a lot here about this idea of facilitating relationships between sort of buyer and understanding the artisans who have made that. Why do you think that's so important to kind of facilitate that relationship? And how do you think that brands can kind of do better moving forwards? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. Let's have one.
For me, it's really the exchange between a customer and the maker. I mean, it goes beyond just the currency. It's a value. It's an exchange of culture. I think understanding. It's a mean to connect. We tell a lot about the stories that is behind the piece, but I think it's beyond the story. It's really the respect of this, the making, the process of anything, from milk to an apple to it's really to give respect back from the buyer to the process, the time that has been gone there, the love, the passion And so I feel like it's very important. I'm lucky, and I found myself being in that position of being kind of the bridge. I went back to Afghanistan. I stayed there for a couple of years, and for some personal reason, I had to move back. And I said, wow, I was finally being back, and I was extremely happy to be back. But I think, being the transition and really explaining that Afghanistan is, again, not just a war-torn country, that the women have, it's not just the face of the woman that it's beyond all of that. It's really being able to tell something more. And I think the people that are wearing a necklace or a scarf, they wear something that is more precious or beyond just, a scarf that has a certain value. It's really the human being that is behind.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just to move on to some questions from sort of the audience. Obviously, I'd encourage the audience now to pop any in the live box if you have any. We had a couple sent in from emails. So if I can go to Tanya first. There was a question sent in for you, which was, what do you think the future of sort of jewelry making will look like in Afghanistan and sort of globally in terms of Afghan jewelry in the coming years?
Afghanistan jewelry sector is one of the prominent export commodity for the Afghan economy. And luckily, in just the last 2 years, it has been recognized. Better late than never. And so there's a lot of efforts by the government, by the international community to kind of work in the sector to make it more private sector friendly or investment friendly for those who want to invest in the sector. We've had some very, very major problems in the sector from a legal perspective. Even now, there's a ban on exporting raw gems and jewelry, obviously gems, to the international market. The incentive behind the government was to, build the capacity and do a lot of value addition within the country to create jobs, which is wise. But for that, we needed to have the capacity, the skills that is required, especially if gems are one of the commodities that has a very good market internationally. And for that, we needed to have the right cutting skills and the right designing skills. That is my small way of contributing back, because I'm introducing the designs in a home country, not just improving my artisans' designing skills in general, but also introducing the new trends. So other businesses are also, I can see their work that they're kind of following the trend. So there is a huge demand in the sector internationally as well, because Afghan gems, they have a good, reputable, awareness within the community internationally. From the trade shows that I was working with businesses, and in Milan, the very recent one was Milan, which Zulaikha joined as well. We saw big companies like Cartier. They came to see the businesses that were representing the gem sector and seeing the samples, and they were interested to place orders. So, and the good thing of talk about the kind of work that we're doing. Handmade products, it has its own values, as Zulaikha said, not just the product itself, but also the sentimental value that it carries, the satisfaction that the customer gets in knowing that they are supporting human beings, and the culture exchange that it facilitates. And globally, the trend is now that the customers are very conscious of what they're buying, and they want to be part of initiatives and causes, which I believe these sectors can represent. So I am very hopeful about the future of the sector, and clearly it does have huge potential in terms of contributing to the economy of the country, but also introducing the culture of Afghanistan, the values of Afghanistan internationally as well.
Fab, thank you so much. We also had one for Jeanne from emails, which was, how do you hope that Zazi Vintage and kind of similar panelist brands can, inspire other brands to invest in Afghanistan and kind of also invest in human-focused business models that go beyond greenwashing and advocate for social justice and climate action?
That's such a beautiful question because, yeah, I do really believe that. I think that is just by doing what we're doing and continuing to facilitate a new story, and I think it's been such a beautiful journey for me to also have so many people around me, both founders of brands and people within the fashion industry that are just for the first time, opening up their eyes to the possibility. Because I think people just don't think about investing within the supply chain of Afghanistan because it has not been necessarily on the fashion map for all the obvious reasons. And I think it's all of these stories, how many, like how small the community is, or it is has such a big impact. And I think that's what I notice within, I guess, the work that we all do, is that you really can open eyes through these stories of creativity and real human lives, which also, is the most beautiful and most impactful process in this whole problem that we face in the whole world, which is this problem of othering, and I think this is sort of like, oh, these people there or these people there, where I think, by sharing this platform of creativity, it really just becomes like very inherent that we share this one humanity. And I think that's the beautiful thing when I'm even with, let's say, my friends or my friends that have babies, and I just, I say like, oh, I was on the phone today, and the Afghan family, they have this young child, and she's going through this phase right now. And then it's just like, it's such a beautiful thing to see these two worlds come together, and see this shared humanity and see so many amazing possibilities. And I think that's the biggest joy, to just to be able to feel like, wow, with like such a small community of fashion, there's so much hope. And I'm so in awe of all the women here today on the panel, about their dedication and their love to the Afghan arts and crafts. And yeah, I think probably the only real good answer is to just keep on doing what we're doing, and hope the world wakes up to the beauty.
Thank you. Thanks. And Joanna, I've got one final question for you. This was also from email. It was, what kind of distinctive patterns and designs would we expect to see from Azezana?
Well, we're currently, we've all mostly focused on very traditional patterns. Well, we've always given the women initially the free hand to weave patterns, very traditional patterns, and getting them then later accustomed to tastes out here in the West or in the OECD countries. Unfortunately, we used to also have a local market, but that doesn't exist anymore. Azezana is selling mostly to the Western markets. The reason why we don't have a local market anymore is because international organizations and various international bodies aren't sitting anymore in Afghanistan, or there are very few, and we used to have events, or we used to have, through them, we could sell at local markets in Afghanistan. So a bulk of our sales are in OECD countries, in Europe, Britain, Canada, the US, Australia, etc. With patterns, we currently are looking at old ancient monuments that of Herat, for example, those beautiful tiled patterns, geometrical tile patterns that you see. We are using those patterns we are weaving these patterns on silk and cashmere. This is something what the women didn't do before, and they are learning to do this right now on silk and cashmere. We're currently doing it for a client based in London, and which has got a really lots of positive response. We're also looking at ways to train the women more, to improve their weaving skills on silk and cashmere, and to introduce also adjacent products. Besides scarves, we are also doing lampshades and throws and various other textiles that are have high demand out here in Europe, especially, and yeah, we usually make custom-made products, and where the client tells us what they want, but we also try to integrate some of the patterns from Afghanistan, very, influenced from very old architectural monuments, from the old rugs, patterns that you find on Afghan rugs, or very old ancient ceramics, and which are timeless, which are really timeless patterns, and yeah. So you will see more of that in Azizana's products, not just on silk, but on throws, and probably we might also introduce embroidery. That's where we are looking to train the women also in embroidery, because at the moment they're just weaving, even the patterns they weave on silk and cashmere. Embroidery would be taking it a step forward. Yeah.
Amazing. That's lovely to hear about, future plans. That's great. So I think that wraps us up for today, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this evening, and we really hope you enjoyed the discussion. Here at Afghanaid, we work with women in remote areas of Afghanistan to realise their potential and help them lift their families out of poverty. In our tailoring classes, we teach traditional embroidery and manufacturing techniques, and alongside this, we also deliver courses in literacy, enterprise development, and financial management to encourage women to launch their own businesses and sell their products at the market. If you would like to support a woman in Afghanistan, obviously, I would encourage you to look at the websites of all of our panelists. And yeah, I mean, we've just had a comment here of someone saying that they're wearing a yellow Zarif vest and a visa brooch, eager to wrap myself in Zazi and Azizana now. So yeah, I would encourage you to head to the website, or if you would like to support our work, you can text Afghan to 70470. I'll just flash this up here. And that will donate £5. Text costs £5 plus one standard rate message. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and to our wonderful panelists for their contributions this evening. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye.